And here we are, ready for another 7 minutes on ITSPmagazine. And we're coming to you from the HITRUST Collaborate Conference 2024. We're going to talk about cyber insurance today. There was a fantastic panel with brokers and buyers of insurance. I'm here with Monica Shokrai. Thank you for joining me from Google.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks for having me.
And before we get into the topic, maybe a few words about your role at Google Cloud and what you do with relation to cyber insurance.
Absolutely. So I lead risk and insurance for Google Cloud. That traditionally is a buyer's role. So I sit within the finance team and help procure insurance for the company. But because of the nature of Google and just how my role has evolved over time, I also work very closely with the business and think of partnerships of how to use insurance to help our customers and ultimately reduce risk for our customers and ourselves. So yeah, it's been exciting. I've been at Google for 6 years.
It's fantastic. So I have to start here. I know we want to talk about some of the challenges, but I'm going to tune it to the fact that you sit within finance. Because I think a lot of people generally think cyber insurance is owned by CISOs.
Yeah.
And not necessarily in the finance team or the CFO. So what are some of the challenges you think a lot of organizations might face because of that potential disconnect or what have you?
Yeah, it's a great question. So typically cyber insurance is procured through the treasury organization within finance or the legal organization, but it's one of those coverages from an insurance perspective that is more interdisciplinary than probably the other ones that you'll see on a day-to-day basis. And ultimately the risk lies with the CISO. And so there's a lot of collaboration that takes place. I work very closely with our Chief Information Security Officer and his broader team on trying to understand their risk and translate it. You asked a little bit about challenges. I think the standard organization has a big divide between those groups. And so in an average organization, there's communication challenges at times, understanding challenges at times. But I do think that as cyber insurance matures as a market, those two groups are coming closer and closer together. And I've heard the term before, like, should a CISO be a cyber CFO, for example? I'm not sure if there's articles about that sort of thing, because ultimately they're the ones that are accepting the risk. And I think there's a lot of interesting innovation that can happen at the intersection of those two groups.
So how do you approach looking at the risk exposure and the posture that you have and bring the teams together, I guess, to really understand so you can actually get coverage? I'm sure it's probably easier for Google than maybe some other organizations, but how do you actually put your best foot forward, maybe leveraging some of the high trust work, the R2 stuff
Yeah. Absolutely. So my organization in particular, which might be a little bit unique just because of the nature of Google, we actually model all of our risk in-house. So what I didn't mention is I also lead our actuarial team for Alphabet. We quantify that risk, and we can't quantify that risk without a very deep engagement with our security teams. And so there's a lot of discussions about trying to understand how things are built and have that integration so that we can have a better outcome. So that's one of the things that we do that's somewhat unique. From a HITRUST perspective, we're HITRUST certified. We are a partner of HITRUST. We work with them quite a bit. And we developed a program that's similar to the R2 program that they put together. And so we've collaborated with them in that regard. But less in our specific cyber insurance renewal, just because of the scope and size of Alphabet. It's a lot of conversations at the executive level with cyber insurers for them to understand the approach that we have as a whole.
And so you do a lot of risk analysis then, obviously. That's what you're saying. Maybe other organizations don't do nearly as much, but the value of having that understanding and then mapping that to an R2, so it brings consistency, I presume.
Yeah.
And maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll take a slightly different route just because our program's slightly different, but similar to the R2 framework, what we put together is this idea that today cyber insurance is you have these long questionnaires that you're answering with yes or no questions that don't always reflect the questions don't always reflect risk. And so one of the things that we put together is a scan of your Google Cloud environment under this program called the Risk Protection Program, where you can identify security metrics and through a couple clicks send that to our insurance partners. Right now we're working with Allianz and Munich Re. And the idea that we have within that program, actually, we've collaborated very closely with HITRUST to develop the R2 program. So I'd say they're definitely not competitive. They're more like sister programs, but they're similarly trying to get the insurance industry to a place where we're using data in an automated way to better underwrite cyber insurance.
And sometimes with automation, you might skip steps or leave some things on the table you might not want to. But how does, I presume a lot of the data that you have, that you bring to the table, as well as the data that HITRUST has, eliminates some of that risk of leaving things open or missing the mark somewhere?
Yeah, the way that we're approaching it to date, and I believe HITRUST is similar with their program, is that we're trying to automate the insurance process as much as we can. So the data that we do have that will pre-fill their applications or understand certain areas of risk that an insurer wants to better evaluate, that will reduce the number of questions that you have within your questionnaire. But if there's something that's not sufficient, we'll keep that question until we get to a place in the industry where we can use automated data from within a customer's environment to answer it. So I would say it's a step forward, and ultimately, hopefully, anything that can be automated will be automated, and it'll ultimately bring the security team into the same mindset as the insurers, where if I'm reducing risk, I get rewarded for that from an insurance perspective.
Fantastic. I love this innovation because I'm a nerd like that. But I'd love to talk more, but that is 7 minutes on ITSP Magazine. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.